So, welcome and thank you for tuning in to today's show. So, on today's show, we have Amberly Lago joining us. Amberly is a peak performance coach, TEDx speaker, podcaster, and a leading expert in the field of resilience and transformation. She is the best selling author of True Grit and Grace and the founder of Unstoppable Life Mastermind. Now, through her book, coaching methods, and masterminds, she has curated unique tools to teach others how to tap into the superpower of resilience and elevate their lives and businesses. And on another note, and an exciting bit of news, Amberly will also be joining us for our Become a Force for Good event in October as a keynote speaker, talking about how to build resilience to perform at your peak. So thank you so much for joining us today, Amberly.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. And thank you for that incredible introduction. And I am so honored to have the opportunity to be a speaker at your event. So thank you for that. I'm so honored to get to speak to your audience. And it's so good to see your faces.
It's so good to see yours, and the energy that's already exuding from you is a win in my book already. Wherever this conversation goes, because no doubt our audience can pick up on that as well. And I would really love, because I know you've got a very interesting backstory. I would really love for you for us to perhaps start the conversation there. It's like, who is Amberly, perhaps outside of that introduction, and how did you get to where you are, sitting in front of us today, having this conversation?
Well, thank you. It's interesting when when I heard you read the introduce me, I'm kind of like, oh, well, that's me, huh? Because it's kind of the highlight reel of some things that I have accomplished. But my goodness, I only get to be here with y'all today because I have discovered how to be resilient from falling and failing and almost dying and going through a lot of real life catastrophes. And, when I was 38, I think my whole kind of identity was based on what I did, what I could provide for my family. I was in the health and wellness industry for 26 years. I had a very successful career. I used to teach people how I had a trainer certification preparation course. And through that course where I taught trainers how to become trainers, I would handpick the best ones and they would come work with me. And so I thought, wow, I've worked hard, but I've finally built this successful career. I was sponsored by Nike. I was in the best shape of my life. Two healthy kids, a great marriage. I had just finished doing an infomercial and a photo shoot. I was in magazines like Health and Shape and really thinking, wow, all that hard work finally paid off. And, in the blink of an eye, it all changed. And I think that so many of us have experienced a lot of change, especially in the last couple of years. And for me, the biggest change of my life came when I was on my way home from work and I was on my motorcycle and this SUV shot out of a parking lot and T-boned me. And I was thrown about 30 feet. And as I'm sliding across the asphalt, all I could think about was, please don't let another car hit me. I didn't know what I was sliding into. And when I came to a stop, I remember looking down at my leg, and I only looked once because it is crazy to look down at your leg and see it just completely crumbled. There was blood everywhere. And because I've had a lot of challenges and started working from a very young age, I was a single mom for 10 years. And my first thought wasn't, oh my gosh, I'm bleeding out here on the street. One of my very first thoughts was, oh, this can't be good. I might have to train clients on crutches for a while. Like, it's crazy what goes through your mind. And then, I immediately felt pain. I did not know at the time how serious this accident was, like just that it was going to change my life forever. I also didn't know that my femoral artery was severed and I was literally bleeding out. Thank goodness I had this guy who was an angel. He came and made a tourniquet around my leg right away and saved my life. paramedics were right down the street. They saw the accident. So they started running towards me before they even got the 911 call. There happened to be a nurse that pulled over and came and grabbed my hands and was telling me, you need to breathe with me. Cause let me tell you, I was saying some cuss words and screaming 911. And I got rushed to the hospital, and in the emergency room, it was chaotic. I mean, it was filled with cops. My husband is a first responder, and he was there, and news travels fast in the brotherhood and sisterhood of the police force. And so it was full of cops. And my husband, he's, like I said, a first responder. He's a big, tough guy. I had never seen him cry, and he was crying hysterically. And that really scared me, because I thought, am I dying? Is this it? And I yelled across the ER, honey, get over here. I need you to be strong for me. And that's the last thing that I remember before he came over, held my hand, and I was put in induced coma. My organs were shutting down. I'd lost so much blood, they couldn't control the pain. So they had to put me in this induced coma. And when I woke up from a coma, I learned I had a 1% chance of saving my leg from amputation. And they said, basically, it's like a war wound. We need to amputate. And all I thought about was, wait a minute, you said there's a 1% chance. That means there's still a chance. And I want to find a doctor who's willing to take that chance with me. And it took, so much grit. And by the grace of God, a lot of prayers, 34 surgeries and months in the hospital, and they saved my leg. But that was really the beginning of transformation. And I think that I've learned some of my biggest lessons, and how to be resilient, but also not just about grit, but really having to give myself some grace and learn to love myself again, and accept that my leg is now deformed and gives me pain. I was diagnosed with this disease called complex regional pain syndrome, which leaves me in constant chronic pain. It's incurable. So they say. I believe that maybe there's a way to get, a cure someday. And so some that are listening today, you might be going, well, I didn't get hit by a truck. I can't relate, but I think that we all feel like in some way we've been hit by something, whether it is whether it's physical, whether it's mental, whether it's emotional, whether it's financially, we got hit. For me, we had $2.9 million worth of medical expenses. I was out of work for a year and a half when I was the main breadwinner. And so through this process of really taking a good hard look at my life, and finding out who I am, not what I do, but who I am as a person, has been a journey. And so my intention to, being here with y'all is to share some of the things that have helped me on that journey to rebuild my life, to climb out of despair, to get sober, to completely reinvent what I do, and go from being broken in every way, mentally, spiritually, physically, to having a life that I love and getting to work with people that I love. And to me, that's what true success is having the freedom to do the things that you love with the people that you love and make a positive impact on the world. So that's kind of where I came from, and kind of where I am, and how I got so blessed to get to be here with y'all today.
Beautiful, story there, sharing that. I had to remind myself that it ended okay. When you was describing the story, I'm like, how does this end? I obviously knew how it ended because you're sitting here with us today. But it's so true what you said there about we've all been hit by something. It's what we do when we get hit, right? Is that me quoting Rocky? It might be, but it is about what happens in that moment. There are so many people that would have accepted that 99% of not being able to save your leg, right? But you're that 1%. And I think there's going to be so much wisdom throughout this conversation as to why was that 1% so important to you? In fact, I'd love to know that.
Yeah, and it's funny because that question was actually asked in a different way. When I was on the Today Show, I got to, I mean, it's crazy that I didn't even own a computer 5 years ago. And now here I have a computer sitting with you, learned how to work Zoom. I didn't know anything about technology. And so when I decided to write my book, I got asked to go interview with Megyn Kelly on the Today Show. And one of the questions that she asked, and I remember being so nervous about going on the show. And I had asked, well, what are they going to ask me? And the producer said, this is news. You just need to go with your ears open and pay attention to what she asked. And one of the questions she asked was, well, why did you want to keep your leg? And I said, well, it was my leg. I wanted to keep it. But really, when I asked myself why it was so important, was running was my drug of choice, basically. I ran when I was anxious. I started running at a very young age, and I realized how it made me feel, and it made me feel better. I didn't know just how much I had been dependent on my physicality in running. But as a young child, I was sexually abused. And working out and dancing and running is how I kind of processed that pain. I used the shame, the anger, fear, frustration, and I ran, and that made me feel better. Well, my thought was, you're going to amputate my leg. What am I going to do for work? It's my livelihood. It's what I do to feel better. I was a fitness model, and my thought was, I need my leg. I need to feed my family. And I know there are plenty of amputees that go on to be Olympians. One of my friends, Amy Purdy, who is incredible and one of my biggest inspirations, she's a double amputee. But in my mind, I just thought, I want to keep my leg. And I kept thinking, well, I got to get back to what I was doing. And what I realized is resilience isn't necessarily going back. I don't think it's bouncing back. I think it's your ability to move forward. It's bouncing forward. It's choosing to find the courage and move forward and be open to new ways of doing things and open to new possibilities. And that's something that I really had to learn the hard way, because I kept trying so hard to go back to training 12 to 14 clients a day, back to what I was doing. And it just wasn't working. And when I stopped trying to fix what was broken and just started saying, well, what are other options? Is when my life started to change.
So, like what you just said there, I think it's for anyone listening, I think they really need to take note of that. Is like you said, you got to a point where you just had to accept that you're not broken. Like things that your life has changed, and now the question is what are the other what's the next step? What's the next options for me to do? I can either wish for things to go back to the way they were. I can wish for things to go back and try and fight to get back to the old way, the old life. But you obviously realize that that wasn't happening. You realize, okay, I've got new opportunities now open to me. What are those opportunities? And that resilience to be able to recognize and become aware of that, I think is something that a lot of people struggle with. Is when they go through traumatic experiences like that. Obviously not exactly what you've been through, but their own traumatic experiences they've been through. They struggle to find that point between accepting that things have changed.
Yes.
And then moving forward and seeing those opportunities. So what was that like for you? How did that kind of balance go for you to from the accepting of this is how things are now, and then going into what are my opportunities going forward? What was like going through your mind at that point? How did you transition into accepting and then moving forward?
That is such a good question. Oh my gosh, that was actually the hardest thing for me. Acceptance. Oh my God. It like drug me through the hot coals, and I don't know. It was torture basically for me, because I did not want to accept my new normal. And, as an athlete, my whole life, as a dancer, man, I was good. I can't say that I'm good at a lot of things, but I'm good at grit, and I was good at working hard, and I was good at pushing through the pain. And I thought, well, this is very painful, recovering from these surgeries, but I'm just going to work hard and things will get better. And I remember when I was being released from the hospital the first time, I had doctors say, well, it's going to, probably take you a couple of years to learn how to walk again. And I was like, they don't know me. Like, I am going to be up and walking in months. You just wait. And so 4 months after the accident, I was able to stand upright on one leg, but on crutches, which was a big deal when I couldn't stand up at all for a long time. And I went into this one doctor, and he took a look at me, and I thought he was going to say how proud he was of me for being upright and putting myself together and getting to that appointment. And he ran out of the office. And I looked at my husband and I said, well, that's not the reaction I was hoping for. And he came back in, and that was when they diagnosed me with this nerve disease. And he said, are you the kind of person that likes to push through pain? And I like, well, yes, I am. I got a PhD and suck it up. And yeah, I got this. And he's like, well, you need to stop. You need to stop right now. You've got something very serious. And I'm thinking to myself, well, yeah, I got hit by an SUV. I know it's serious. Like, okay. And he says, your life is never going to be the same. You've got complex regional pain syndrome. You're going to be permanently disabled. You're going to have to wear orthopedic shoes if you'll be able to wear a shoe at all. He goes, you're going to have to go home and you need to get back in your wheelchair. And I'm like, okay, for how long? And he's like, forever. And I felt like I had been kicked in the gut. I cried all the way home, and I didn't go and get back in my wheelchair. Instead, I went straight to physical therapy. And the physical therapist said, Amberly, what are you doing here? You don't even have an appointment today. I was there every day. And I said, well, I've just learned something. I've got this nerve disease, I guess, and I'm going to have to work harder than I've ever worked before if I want to live the life that I've always imagined. And I didn't know how hard that was going to be because I was in denial. I was like, this can't be my life. There is no way that I can be diagnosed with this disease. That can't be me. So I'm like, I don't believe him. I'm going to go to another doctor. That doctor said the same thing. I was like, those doctors are wrong. I'm going to find another doctor. Third doctor said, yeah, you do have this disease and you need to take radical action and get some treatment. I was getting all these treatments. I mean, I had never done a drug in my life, and all of a sudden I was being infused with ketamine. I was doing Eastern, Western medicine. At one point, I was on 73 homeopathic pills, 11 prescription medications. Nothing was working. And I stopped taking everything cold turkey, and I was in denial, and the pain was getting worse, and I could not stuff it down anymore. I couldn't stuff down the shame anymore. I was embarrassed of the way that I looked. In fact, I hated the way that I looked. And then I started to hate myself because I started drinking every day to try to cope with the pain, to try to numb out the pain and stuff down the shame. And I got to a place of desperation. And I think sometimes we're in that place. Sometimes we need someone else to kind of give us a different perspective on things and help us to be in acceptance. And for me, I had a doctor that did that. So my solution about a year after, when I was in denial for all these things, I thought, I'm going to go to the doctor. And I told him, I said, I appreciate that you've done 34 surgeries to save my leg, but we just need to amputate it. It's given me too much pain. And again, I was like, I just need to get back to what I was doing. He says, well, we can't amputate. It's not a solution. You've got CRPS and it might make it spread. It could cause it to get worse. And he did something that changed my life. He actually took my leg and he put it in his lap. And my first thought is, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's putting my ugly, deformed leg on his nice white coat. And then he looked at my leg like it was a masterpiece. It's all scarred and deformed and my ankles fused. And he looked at it like, wow, this is a work of, look at what I saved. This is a work of art. And tears just came down. And I thought, if he can look at my leg like that, maybe I can learn to look at it like that too. And day by day, little by little, I started being able to just accept, this is it. These are the cards I've been dealt. Yep, I've got this disease. And I'm getting emotional because it's not always easy. I mean, look, pain's pain. We all have pain. But we have to decide that we're going to get through it the best way we can. And I think to move through hard times, we have to take radical acceptance. And for me, it was that doctor just looking at me differently, just giving me that perspective of, wow, I could then start to think these scars they symbolize the battles I've overcome. After that day, I started to be able to like love myself a little bit more every day. And so if you're listening and you're struggling with being in acceptance, or you don't like yourself like I didn't like myself, if you can just be willing to try every day, I promise, if you start to shift the things that you say to yourself. And for me, I started to be able to even love my scars. And I think sometimes what we think of is something that is like hard or ashamed of or ugly or in our life, or we're embarrassed, that can actually be our superpower. Because when I started accepting my scars and this pain, and I started to wear shorts, I started having people going, wow, the fact that you aren't embarrassed to show your scars and I see how you love yourself. I've started to accept my scars and I can let go of that shame. And little by little, it took a lot of therapy. It took a lot of healing. It took a lot of tears. And for a long time, I didn't cry. I had shut down my feelings, but I was tired of just dealing with it. I wanted to heal it. And I think that transformation starts with radical acceptance. And it's taking a good, hard look at your life, at what's working and what's not working. And I will say for me, I went to a place where I had to be in acceptance of drinking to cope with pain was spiraling me down worse into depression, into despair, into where I didn't like myself. And so when I accepted that I had a problem with that, I could start to get help. And in 2016, I got sober, and that's when my life really started to change. So today, it's not that I love myself all the time, and it's not that life is perfect, and I still deal with pain. In fact, last night I was laying in bed with my husband, and we were talking. We had a work event, and I was, going on about how much I love and respect my friend Ken Joslin. I'm like, he travels so much, and he does all these events, and he's got so much energy. And I said, imagine what I could do if I didn't have pain every day. But then I had to even shift that thinking to, well, this pain has taught me how to pace myself through situations, how to have more compassion and empathy for others who have pain. So whether it's, mentally, spiritually, we have pain, there are ways to get through it. And that starts with acceptance, one day at a time, doing things to encourage yourself to get better, but it's also the people that you surround yourself with. And I say that because it's so important to be around people who believe in you, who can love you before you can love. My husband loved me until I could love myself. When I got sober, I had women that loved me through, and still do, my sobriety. This morning, I have a group of entrepreneurs that we text each other encouraging, like help each other with launches, text each other encouragement. So I think it's so important to have that support. And the one thing that really changed it all for me, and it was the scariest thing that I did, was I had to ask for help. And I just want anyone who's listening, who's struggling, know that you are not alone on your journey. There's somebody else out there that is going through exactly what you're going through. Maybe it's not identical, but they've been through it and they've gotten to the other side. So ask for help. Don't do it alone. Whether it is, a coach or a mentor or somebody that is an entrepreneur that has, a lot of, get in their mastermind, whatever it is, don't do it alone. I tried that and it didn't work.
Everything you just shared there is so raw and real, and I'm really grateful that you've shared your story in that way, because there's a lot of talk in the personal development space, and when it comes to things like acceptance, I think sometimes it's just easily kind of disregarded in many ways. You decide to accept and that's it. But I think acceptance on its own is a heck of a journey. And you're a shining example of being able to come through the other side. Like you said, obviously still in progress, because we all are as human beings, I think, on our journey. But you've done it with, and I'm seeing the tagline behind you there for anybody listening on the podcast, is true grit and grace. I'd love for you to share where the grace comes into play, because I think everything you've already shared, and please by all means add if we've missed anything around your kind of idea of grit. But I think grace is clearly something that you've embodied to be able to come this far.
Well, thank you so much. Y'all ask the best questions. You're amazing. So I decided when I wanted to write a book, and by the way, everybody was like, you can't write a book. Like, you don't have a college education. I mean, these are people that loved me, but they had never written a book. So they're like, I don't know how you're going to write a book. You don't even own a computer. Like, you need to just stick to the fitness. But I was like, this all couldn't have happened for just no reason. Like, I got through some of the darkest days of my life. And if I can write a book and tell a story to empower and inspire others and to give them hope, then I want to do that. That will give my pain purpose. And so I decided to write this book. I had no idea what I had no idea what, some people have a name for a book and then they write it. I wrote a book and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to call my book. And I say name because it is like birthing a child. But my editor kept saying, you're going to hear it. You'll be walking down the street. It'll come into you'll just pop into your head. Somebody will say it. And I was on my way to the barn. My daughter's a horseback rider. And one of the moms, I had just posted that day that it took 2 years for the bone to grow together. So I had my leg was completely shattered, but there was one area, it was about a 2-inch spot that they thought they were going to have to do a bone graft from my hip and put it into my lower leg. And so I was wearing a bone stimulator on my leg every day. I was trying to put weight on it to try to stimulate the growth. Finally grew together. And this one friend of mine, one of the other moms, I walked up, I'd posted the x-ray and how happy I was that I didn't have to have another surgery. And she goes, girl, I had no idea what your leg looked like. She goes, you've got true grit and grace. And I was like, oh, can I call my book that? She goes, you're welcome. And so that's where the name came from. But the grit, yes, we all need grit to get through challenges, especially as entrepreneurs. And that's where our passion and our perseverance comes into play. And that's where we tap into why we do the things that we're doing. Like, what is that burning desire in us? But the grace for me, obviously it was God's grace, because when I was at my darkest moment and really didn't want to live anymore, and I was thinking, my husband could find another wife. He could find another mom for our kids. Like, they deserve so much better than what I can give them. This is, at that lowest point, I had a little bit of light left in me, barely a flicker, and enough to ask God for help. And I got on my knees and I prayed. And I feel like I had the strength to ask for help from a friend because of God's grace, and that I got through so much. And by the grace of God, the obsession to drink was lifted. But grace also is really the grace that I've had to learn to give myself. Because, man, I don't know about y'all, but I am my own worst critic, my own worst enemy. I have this, like, sometimes people probably think I'm crazy because I will actually talk to myself in the car and be like, Amberly, stop with the negative thinking. How can we shift this into positivity? Because I'll have the inner critic saying, who do you think you are? Like, nobody cares about you. Why do you think you could write a book? Like, you're not smart enough. You're too old. Like, you name it. I will tell myself all of those things. And I have to shift that. And, I wake up. And from the moment I wake up, I wish that I could tell you I wake up and I'm like, life is grand and yay, I'm excited for the day. I wake up, and from the moment I take my first step, I immediately have pain. So I rely on the grace that I give myself and the how I talk to myself. And I have really learned to talk to myself instead of listen to myself, if that makes sense. Like, because if I listen to my head, I would probably just stay in bed. But I talk to myself and go, Amberly, you've got this. Amberly, you might be in pain, but you can walk. It's a miracle. You can walk, and I'll be like, oh, I'm old. I'm like, yeah, life is just beginning. All these new exciting things are happening. And so I think it's the grace that I've learned to give myself. And then when I started working with clients again, I remember one of my clients who recently passed away. She was one of my favorite clients that I had for over 20 years. And she said, Amberly, you're a better trainer now because you understand my pain more. And so I think that it's so important to, yes, give ourselves grace and to have grit, but to also have the grace to do things with kindness and compassion.
Absolutely.
I was just going to say, like, those things, like kindness, compassion, grace, I think they are perhaps some of the missing links to a lot of healing journeys. I think it's very easy, especially as high performers, go-getters, achievers, and that's basically our audience. It's so easy for that inner critic to just come charging on in. One of the things that one of my coaches said to me is to obviously befriend your inner critic, name it, and literally when it shows up, it's like, hello, old friend, we're here again. And then you just start to have a bit more of a lightheartedness with that inner critic. And I personally found that very, very powerful. Is there anything else that you could share with our audience that perhaps helps you to deal with that inner critic, aside from obviously what you've already shared?
Yeah. And you know what? I interviewed Dave Hollis on my podcast, and he said the same thing. He's got this inner critic. He's high performer, very successful, high achiever, and he's got this inner critic. And I think we all do. And he has named his inner critic too. And so, yeah, I've learned to just talk to my inner critic and go, okay, now, why is it that you're telling me that I should be scared to death and shaking right now? And I'm like, oh, okay. I understand that you've come up before to try to protect me, but I'm really okay. And I'm going to get through this. But I think what helps me is, I'm very disciplined. And I know some people don't like the word discipline. They like to, I just want to do things and be free and whatever. But for me, I have to be disciplined. And one of the ways that I build my confidence is I really work on keeping promises to myself. And it starts from the moment I wake up in the morning. So I set my alarm for 5 a.m, which I thought that was pretty early until I interviewed Ben Newman on my show yesterday. And he's like, I get up at 2:42 every day. And I'm like, 2:42. 2:42.
What time do you go to bed?
That's what I asked him. And he's like, right after dinner. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, I'm kidding. I don't go right after dinner. I'm like, I would to get up at 2.
Wow.
But
So that's
for me, you know, I get that alarm goes off and I want to push snooze, but I don't. And when I get up and I'm like, okay, I promised myself I was going to get up at 5 and I did. And so that is like builds my confidence and my accountability to myself. And then the next thing is like I have a very like I kind of in the morning I know I've got smart feet that I know that I'm going to go drink my water and my gut health supplement and you know take my supplements to improve my thinking and you know and all of that, and then I know that I am going to, before I open my phone or do anything, I'm going to go to the gym and move my body. So by the time my daughter wakes up, I can spend time with her and get her ready for school and get her to school and then start my day. And so part of that morning, and I think it's really important for everybody to see what works for them. For me to feel better, I have a gratitude practice that, you know, I say practice because it's something I practice. And I even use an app, and I'm not, you know, this app doesn't tell me to talk about, you know, or anything like that. I don't get paid to talk about this, but it's something that just helps me is it's called my spiritual toolkit and or toolbox, and I go in there and I have a group of ladies, we call each other the God Squad, and we text each other 10 things we're grateful for, and this app just makes it easier to do that. So after I do a little bit of journaling and then I write in my app 10 things I'm grateful for, I can share that. And you know there's some days it's hard to be grateful. You're like, God, today's hard, what can I be grateful for? And I can tell you that when I was stuck in the hospital bed and I could find things to be grateful for when I didn't know if the next day was the day they were going to amputate my leg or if I was going to even survive that next surgery, there's always something to be grateful for. And that gratitude really shifts your perspective. It's the quickest and easiest way to feel better about your situation. And so when I practice gratitude in the morning and I can share that gratitude and I can see what somebody else is grateful for, and throughout the day, when that, you know, inner critic or I'm kind of bummed or whatever, I can shift it to gratitude. I instantly feel better. And then at night, I set every day up for success by at night. I also have a nightly kind of ritual where I have my tea. I don't, you know, I get off the, you know, phone and I ask my daughter, what's one thing you're grateful for? What's the best thing that happened to you today? So it, instead of going to bed going, oh, I didn't get everything done on my to-do list, I could have done better at that. I'm like, well, what's the best thing that happened? And so some people think, gosh, that seems like a lot of work to journal, to text people that what you're grateful for and that you're grateful for them and to work out. And then, you know what? It's a heck of a lot better than a life of misery. Because when I didn't do those things, I was miserable. But when I just do these things, I feel better. And when I feel better, I can do better work. I have better relationships with my team, with the people that I serve, with my family. I have a relationship with my daughters that they can come to me and talk to me and trust me. And that's everything to me. So I think it's really important to figure out what helps you be the best that you can be and stick to those things.
absolutely. Gratitude is one thing that we encourage our community to kind of tap into on a daily and weekly basis. We have a community of our current and past clients that we encourage every week is to share their wins, share their gratitudes. And some weeks you get like almost share, and then other weeks it's like very quiet. What's going on? Has no one got anything to be grateful for? It's those weeks when, like you said, it's what have I got to be grateful for? You struggle to come up with it. And then when people come up and say, oh, I'm not sure what I'm grateful for, or I don't have any wins, and then they start talking and they can't, when they're in that state, that heavy state where they're struggling to find anything and they start talking, they easily miss all these little wins, all these gratitudes that just float by and they don't pay attention to them. And when you start to point them out, they go, oh yeah, I did achieve that. Yes, I'm grateful for that. And they start to, and I think it comes back to what you said earlier in the conversation, is when you said one of the hardest things was asking for help, is having that support. whether it's a coach, whether it's a mentor, whatever that is. And you mentioned about a mastermind, and I know that something you're very passionate about is your mastermind. So I would love for you to share a bit more about your mastermind, also about how it helps the people in it to that support network they get, what influence it has on them when they get that support. So like how that all works for you.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, when I started out, I've always had that entrepreneurial, mindset, and started my first business when I was 13 and figured out things along the way. And so when I decided that I wanted to share my stage and make an impact instead of doing it one-on-one, that, oh, I could help more people at one time if I shared it from stage. And I started getting people to ask me to speak. I didn't have social media. I didn't have a LinkedIn profile. Didn't even know what LinkedIn was, by the way. And so I really started with nothing 5 years ago. I think I had an Instagram page, but it was only to stalk my oldest daughter. And so when I decided to write my book, the publisher said, we do not market this, or if you want to sell your book, then it's up to you to brand yourself and promote it. And I'm like, okay, let me figure this out. So I just started sharing as much value as I could and figuring it out along the way, and building connections through social media. And my husband was like, what are you doing? Why are you on social media? And I'm like, I'm making friends. Like, I'm building connections. He realized and I said, I had a year before my book came out. In that year, I went from a couple of hundred followers on Instagram to, I think now it's like 10,000. Now it's like 222,000. And I say they're my tribe. They're my family. They're people that I love. Like, I can go to any city and say, hey, I'm here. Can we meet for dinner? And my husband saw the impact of social media when every single book signing he went to across the country with me, we sold out of books. And that's the power of social media, because I had developed real connections. And so when I started, got asked to do a TED Talk, and then my book became a bestseller, and then I started my own podcast and it got to top 1%, I started having a lot of people reach out to me and say, how did you get on these stages? How did you start your podcast? Like, I want to do a YouTube channel. How do I do that? I want to write a book. I don't know where to start. And I'm like, well, do you want to do traditional publishing, hybrid publishing? Like, what kind of publishing do you want? And they're like, what? And I thought, well, I want to give people what I wish I had when I was starting on my journey, so they can time collapse and go from point A to point B faster and not waste a ton of money, make a lot of mistakes. And so I basically put together this mastermind called Unstoppable Life, where women, and it's for women. I love you fellas, but I love empowering women, because honestly, I feel like we need more women on stages. We need more women writing best-selling books, speaking on panels, starting their own podcast. And so I thought, I want to really empower and help other women to cultivate and create their story to share on a TEDx stage, to share on bigger stages, to start their podcast. And so I basically open up my playbook. I have speakers that come in that it's taken years to develop relationships. Like Bedros Keuilian spoke at my last mastermind, Greg Reed, Mitch Matthews, Antonio Neves, all these incredible speakers, they come. And the value is that you get to meet people. I think that success is built on relationships.
Yeah.
And when you meet the right people and you're around success-minded people who have already achieved the things that you want to do, and you can really get counsel, not opinion, because there's plenty of people that will tell you, oh, you should do this, and they've never done it. Whether you're, working with me or working with whoever you work with, make sure that they have done the things that you want to do. It's so important when you hire any coach or you invest in any kind of a mastermind, that you're surrounding your people with people that okay, they've achieved the things that I want to achieve. And, I think it's super important. I invest in a coach from business strategy. I invest, I run my own mastermind, but I also invest in a mastermind. I've got a therapist, I've got a sponsor. Like, I think it's so important to align yourself with people who can help you along the way. So the thing that I am most passionate about is my mastermind, where I have seen women just completely transform and shine so bright, launch their podcast, have a best-selling book, get on stages, run their own event. I've even had some people that completely quit their job and launch their whole coaching program. So I'm like, okay, let's do this. So to me, it's super exciting to get to do what I love and really just help people the way to achieve their biggest goals and dreams. So I think we were saying before we started recording, I was like, that's what I am most passionate about. It feels like I felt years ago when I first started getting to dance and go tour around the world. And I was like, this is the life of my dreams. Like the feeling that you get when you get to see people transform and that light just, go off and the light around them shine. It's just, there's something so magical. And so I just feel really blessed that I get to do what I love and help other women along the way.
Love that. You're clearly having that ripple effect with everybody that you touch, right? Whether that be on stage, whether that be in your mastermind, and that ripple effect, I think, goes far and beyond we ever know and we'll ever get to be able to actually see in our lifetime. And I think that's like almost that extra sweet spot that comes from this kind of work. And it's so interesting because there might be, again, people listening to this thinking, well, that sounds like a lot of work too. A bit like when you said about your journaling and your routine, but actually it costs a lot more to not pursue the feeling that you've just described and to not do that work and not to show up in a mastermind and to not show up for yourself. And I think sometimes we can forget that and get too stuck in our comfort zone and in our little safety net, that actually there are people like you, like us, that just want to be people's cheerleaders and see them thrive. And I just think it's so beautiful that in this day and age we can leverage tech, even if you never have before, right? You're clearly a shining example of that. I think it's absolutely awesome what you're doing, and you're clearly sharing the light.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say it's never too late. I'm 50. And if I can figure out how to do, like, I've had so many people that are my age that are like, oh, well, that's not my generation. And I'm like, you know what? My youngest daughter was like, Mom, you're too old for TikTok. Do not get on TikTok. And I'm like, oh, I am getting on TikTok. Flip the camera over. I put my tap shoes on for the first time. I did a little tap dance, and I did this whole story about this is the first time I've been able to tap dance since my motorcycle accident after 34 surgeries. That video went viral. So I want to say, you're never too old. You're never too late. You're never, too dumb. These are the things I told myself. It's like, you don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to start and make sure. It will be so much easier if you just align yourself and surround yourself with people who believe in you and who have done it before. So you don't, because I made so many mistakes. And it was when I invested in my first mastermind that I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then of course I had to go get certified with the Mastermind Association. I was like, I need my certification in that so I can run my own and do it the way I want it, And so, yeah, I just think that there's so much opportunity out there. And if we just decide that we want to do it, anything is possible.
Absolutely. That's just what you said there about, it's what you said a bit about you don't need to know everything to get started. You don't need to know the ins and outs. You just need to start and then trust in your own ability to figure it out as you go along. And I think that's, I think I was reading a book by Richard Branson, one of the most amazing, I think, entrepreneurs in the world, multiple billion-dollar businesses. And he just says yes to everything. and then figures it out after. Any opportunity comes up, say yes, and then learn how to do it later. And I think that's such a good thing because, like you said, yeah, you failed a lot of times, you made mistakes, but those are learned. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. Like if we went through life and never failed at anything, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
that's good. That's an unhealthy kind of relationship to have, I think, with success, because then when something does go wrong in your life, literally you crash and burn because you don't know how to handle failure, you don't know how to handle mistakes. So you've got to have those mistakes because they're learning. There are opportunities to learn, opportunities to grow. So I think it's so important for anyone listening is if you get an opportunity that comes up and you don't know how to do it, say yes and figure it out.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know how to do a podcast, but I was like, I want to do a podcast so I can share. I was speaking at all these events and I was meeting all these incredible speakers that all had podcasts. And they were asking me to be on their podcast and I didn't have anything to give to them or to promote them. And I was like, I want to share their amazing stories of struggles to success so other people can level up their life. And so I started my podcast and of course asked some of the biggest names in the industry as my first guest. I'm like, oh my gosh. And they said yes. And so there I was. I found myself at a radio station doing a podcast, and I just was figuring it out along the way, had no idea what I was doing. And I'm still figuring things out. I'm an overcoming perfectionist, and I've learned to just like, it's better to just start than to go, oh, I'm going to wait till it's all perfect, because then it'll never be done. You're never really 100% ready. And so, we learn along the way. And some of my most valuable lessons that were cost me a lot of money, I'm able to share those things with people in my community. And I'm not ashamed to share because I don't want them to make the same mistake. I want to save them money. I want to save them time. But yeah, I learned a lot of mistakes just from the last in-person event that I did. It's like, wow, you got to really read that contract, like the fine print, or you find out later that coffee cost you over $2,000 for a 2-day event. Crazy stuff. You know what I mean? And so I'm like, okay, well, I can share that with people who are going to do their first in-person event. Like, you better read that contract and realize that coffee costs $135 a gallon. And is that something you want to invest in, or do you want to buy everybody Starbucks gift cards? You know what I mean?
Exactly. And it's those things that people don't think about. And I know that's like one example, but I think there's probably so many like huge lessons as well that you just can't put a price on. I think when you're learning from people who have been there, done that, walked the path. And I love the term you use, like just time collapse, right? Because there's this illusion that it can't happen quickly. And I think that is absolute rubbish. I think, yeah, we need to be patient on our journey to whatever it is we're trying to achieve, but it's possible to do it quickly. I love that you said like your podcast, you just immediately invited some of like the biggest names and you got a yes. It's like perfect. You're setting the bar, right? And I think sometimes we set that bar too low based on that inner critic or whatever, or other people's voices in your mind and things that they've said. So can I just ask before we start to wrap up, so I want to be respectful of your time, is with regards to setting the bar in your business, in your life, because I know you're all about peak performance, what is the one piece of advice that perhaps you could give to our listeners that will help them raise their bar from wherever they are?
Well, I think that everything we've talked about doing the things to trust yourself and build your confidence, it's a daily thing, and it's going to be easier to raise the bar if you trust yourself, but it's also going to be easier to raise the bar if you are someone who is constantly adding value and you're looking at doing something and raising the bar, even if it's to collaborate with someone on a project or have them speak at your event or invite them to your podcast, or be on their podcast. Like, I think it's very important to see what value can you give. And as long as you're like, I know I can add value. I know that I have a solution for this problem and I can solve that for someone, then it's going to be easier to raise that bar. And so in every situation, I also love a good challenge. And for me, my biggest motivation is when somebody tells me it can't be done. And I'm like, oh, really? Watch me, and so when, someone says, oh, like when I had my first book signing, I had a good friend of mine say, oh, you'll never get a book signing at Barnes and Noble. I couldn't even get a book signing there. And I'm like, oh, really? Well, I am going to go get to know the manager at Barnes and Noble, and I'm going to see what value I can give to her and her store. And guess what? We sold out of books 3 times. They bought books. My husband had to run to our house and buy books from us. But what I did was I was like, how can I make this experience such a valuable and a win-win for everybody? So I don't look at things as what can I get from it? I look at it as what can I give?
Cool. Absolutely. I'm so looking forward to you speaking at our event in October. I just want to hear more from you. And I think anyone listening definitely wants to hear more from you as well. But as you, also, anyone listening, if you've been watching our social media, has been kind of digesting our emails, you'll know our theme for this year's event is live authentically, live abundantly, live consciously. So my last question for you, Amberly, is how do you lean in to those 3 areas? And how does it help you perform at your peak? So it's authenticity, abundance, and consciousness, consciously.
I think a lot of times I can get stuck in my head thinking things, and I always have to remind myself, stay in your heart, stay in your heart. For instance, I have this big event coming up, and I'll be speaking alongside John Maxwell, Ed Milet, Randy Garn, a lot of big names. I'm the only female speaker. So I can start going, oh my gosh, who do I think I am? They're amazing. Like they're legends. And then there's me, like the imposter syndrome comes in. And I always say, always go back to your truth. Like, don't try to be like someone else. Don't just be you. Stay true to you. And I think that when you show up every day and you just focus on being the best person that you could be, and when you feel intimidated or a little lost, you always go back to what is your truth, and you share from your truth and your experience. We all have a story, and we all have experience and ways that we've gotten through it. And so share those things. And I just think it's really important. Again, I can't say enough to make sure that you surround yourself with other people who are like-minded. So when you are having a hard day, that you can reach out to others and you can support each other. It makes all the difference in the world. And then one last thing that really, really helps me is if I'm feeling, we all have a pity party sometime. If I'm feeling like, oh, poor me, what, I'm like, how can I go help somebody? How can I go be of service? And so, I've had people go, well, how could you be of service when you were stuck in a hospital bed? I'm stuck in a hospital bed, and they will try to tell me how they can't be of service. And I'm like, you can always be of service. And when I was in the hospital bed, believe me, I had all the nurses on exercise routines, because when they found out I was a trainer, they're like, well, how do I get a better booty? I was writing out exercise programs for my clients. I was still checking on my clients. I was still making phone calls, and that got me out of myself and going and helping other people. So I think being of service is really, really, it's magic. It really is medicine for your soul. And then I'll share one last story. Is a couple of days ago, I had a flat tire. I'm in the middle of Texas, little town, on a Sunday. There are no Tesla dealers anywhere within like almost 100-mile radius. I'm literally in the Bible Belt of Texas. Nothing's open. Took the tow truck 5 hours to get to me. I managed to find and walk to this McDonald's, and I'm sitting at McDonald's. And sitting there starting to get frustrated. And I see this lady outside that had fallen and hit her head. And I'm like, nobody's helping her. I'm like, well, I'm going to go help her. And I went and helped her. Her husband was freaking out, didn't know what to do. I think was in kind of shock. She was kind of freaking out. I'm used to blood at this point. I'm like, I need you to hold your head. Now I need you to put your arm around me. I got to get you inside and get you sitting down. And anyway, long story short, she was looking at me like I was crazy. So I just grabbed her and took her inside and called 911, got her help. Just being able to help her in that moment, I'm like, flat tire. Who cares about a flat tire? I'm alive. I'm not bleeding. Here this lady busted her head open. She ended up being just fine. She didn't have a concussion. She was fine. But just as an example, just being able to help somebody completely shifted the way that I felt. So, practice the gratitude, do things to build your confidence and your accountability to yourself, and go be of service.
Thank you for being of service today with us as well, Emily, and for our audience. Like John said, I'm also super excited to hear you speak, obviously, at the event on the 27th of October. And just to remind our audience, Emily is going to be speaking on the topic of how to build resilience and perform at your peak, which I have no doubt is going to be even more valuable than what you've heard today. And you really are a key example of somebody who's living authentically, living abundantly, living consciously. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the world. I really enjoyed listening to you, and there's so many takeaways personally. So I have no doubt our audience are going to feel the same way.
Well, thank you so much. And yes, I am, like I said, so honored and excited to get the opportunity to speak at your event. And I can't wait to share my 5-part strategy on tapping into your superpower of resilience and thriving at your event. And I love the work that you do, and I just feel blessed that we met. So thank you for the work that you do. And I know the ripple effect of these events that you're putting on is just it will go on and on and on. So thank you so much.
Thank you.